Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story. And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Hey everybody, this is Bill Manning. This is Studio C41. I have the gang with me, except for Michael. Michael is still doing business stuff. He actually never left for like the past 2 weeks.
I'm pretty sure he hasn't gone to sleep yet either.
No. So, but he I think his arm is still stuck in that fixer in that black and white machine.
It may be giving him superpowers.
Well, after going to Dragon Con, you would think that he would come back with superpowers or something.
Well, or at least some kind of cold.
There's so many people there.
Oh, man, there's usually the con crud, they call it. But he didn't get sick this year, so I'm proud of him.
Yeah,
he actually got some sleep.
Well, it's only been a couple days, so we'll see what happens.
Fair enough.
So, Steven, man, how are you doing, man?
I am doing well, Bill. Yeah, glad to be here, hanging out, excited. Leaving in a few days to go shoot a wedding in Banff National Park in Canada. So
sorry,
I know it's terrible, but I'm doing all right.
Cool. All right. Well, we're going to jump right into it. We have Brent and Mark back from KEH Camera. We are here to talk about large format, and so we talked about it. I told you guys that you had some homework. I recommended picking up a few books, the Ansel Adams books, the print, the negative, and the camera, in no particular order. I mean, those are really important books that I highly recommend that you kind of dive into it, even if it's not large format. I think a lot of the material, even though it was written 80 years ago, 90 years ago, it's still relative, to digital today. I mean, Mark, you were saying last time,
just substitute
the words.
Yeah, digital, and it's the same principles are relative to
composition, exposure, seeing light. That's none of that changes.
Exactly. But anyway, so back into large format. It's very different to 120 film because it is not roll. It's sheet film. So there are a couple different sizes of sheet film. So technically, large format is anything larger than 6x9, pretty much. So last week, you guys brought in that 6x17 film. So technically, it was roll, but it's still considered large format. But the large format comes in sizes 4x5, 5x7. 8x10 and 11x14. Those are the most common sizes, and I think they have some other different sizes. I think as known.
They actually had a 20x30 size film, and
20x30,
a huge camera.
Yeah, there's not to cut you off, but the Polaroid 20x24 camera.
Oh my gosh!
It's still shooting it. They actually had it here earlier this year at a gallery where they were doing limited, like you could do a sitting with it and everything, and it's just a beautiful work of art in itself. But yeah, and then there's also, like you were saying, a 20x30 camera.
Right. Yeah, that's a pretty amazing camera. I saw it at one of the PMA shows that was just spectacular. It was probably 10 or 15 years ago, but it definitely stands out.
Wow.
Sure. I mean, I think historically you could even find, they would call them portrait cameras, the ones that had a panoramic format.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I actually have some of the film holders that are like, I don't know, 12x20 or 24 or something like that. And you could, have those as sheet film. They made all kinds of different sizes.
Yeah. Well, and you can still, there's the standard sizes, like you were saying, Bill, that we're used to, 4x5 and 8x10 being the most common. But I know Ilford does every year, where they do a special order of ultra large format, they call it. So that's anything above 11x14 is ultra large or odd sizes. So pretty much any size film you want, you can get. If Ilford makes it as a film stock, they'll cut it specifically for you for that. So they have standard things where you can do customs. And I know Kodak does limited runs of ultra large format stuff as well. So some films you can get 11x14 and I think 16x20, but because as the film world's getting smaller and more close-knit, it's easier to get custom stuff done, for sure.
Well, and I think the thing to point out about it is, it was in sheet form, but you had to have a film holder to put it in. the film holders typically had two sides to them, so you could put two sheets of film. You had to do it and put it in complete darkness, because it was sensitive to all kinds of light. And when you were out photographing, you had to have a number of film holders loaded and ready to go. I mean, and I think that for me, I would travel if I was out in the Southwest, and you either had what's called a changing bag, which was a light tight bag that you could put your hands in, and you could actually go in and load film holders, or unload film holders, and then you'd have to have film boxes that you'd actually have to put the film in to keep it light tight before you could take it home and process it. Or for many times you'd be in a hotel room and you'd be going to the bathroom and basically seal off. You turn off the lights in the room at night, seal off the door, and then download your film holders and load them. And the biggest problem was dust. So if you didn't do it, you didn't do it in a place, if it had a lot of dust, you were going to get dust on your film, and that would then mean retouching when you actually had to go make a print.
Right. And the thing with those is too, like, unlike roll film, if you have a piece of dust in there, it's not moving, it's not going anywhere. Hey, I think we're live on some social media right now. How about that? So,
now you told me this.
KEH has us on Instagram. So if anybody's hearing this, it's not going to be live anymore. But now I think we're all very aware of how much we've been slouching and just kind of like sitting here. But
I
so
didn't even put my makeup on.
I'm going to go do a few push-ups and be right back. And so anyway.
But I mean, the other thing was that you were talking about Polaroid. I mean, they made Polaroid backs for the view cameras. So we'd use those as a way to test exposure. We'd use a light meter to measure exposure, but we'd use the Polaroid to test what we were actually photographing. Some of the Polaroid was black and white, positive, negative. So you could shoot that and actually have a black and white negative.
Type 55. I got to shoot that in school when the film was still in production. It's kind of like one of the last couple of years of it. And it's just the most beautiful black and white film I've ever seen. It's the negative you get from Type 55.
Well, and I mean, Ansel Adams actually has a book that he did with that. But then the other thing was Kodak, and then I think later Fuji came out with Kodak called them Ever Ready packs.
Oh yeah, the Ready Load.
Ready Loads, right? And so you had a sheet of 4x5 film that you could use in a Polaroid holder, but you then didn't have to load film holders and unload them. So you put them, it was, you put it in the Polaroid, you pulled it out, you exposed it, you pushed it back again and took it out. And now you had your film that was exposed, that was encased in a light tight enclosure. And then you take it back to the darkroom and process it. So you didn't have to worry about loading film holders anymore and dust. And then, it would come out, and I think they had it in 100 speed, 400 speed. Wow. I never used color negative, but I'm sure they had
they did. It was, you can still find on expired packs of it and stuff on eBay. I think it was probably the early 2000s when they stopped making it. But it was basically a self-contained film holder. And there you didn't, like you said, you didn't have to swap out. And I
still see those when we're doing buying events on occasion. People still have them.
I know there's a few. We've talked about Jason Lee on this podcast earlier, and he shot a lot of large format stuff, and he loves the ready load or the quick load stuff. I've got to want to start talking about these cameras and more large format in general, but New 55, which are the guys who tried to invent a new Type 55 film, which has been unfortunately not super successful at that, but they do sell their own version of like a ready or quick load film. And they have a few different stocks that they've actually taken. They'll put it in a ready-to-load pack for you. So that's something that they still sell. Even I don't think they're going to be able to continue with the positive-negative film because they run out of material. But I'm pretty sure they're going to keep selling the quick-load or ready-to-load film. So if that piques anybody's interest, New 55 is a great place to check out for that. And they basically are taking... There's an upcharge in it, but they're taking like Portra 400 and Ektar 100 and T-Max and all these sheet films that are available now and putting them into those ready load packets for you.
That's fantastic.
So you still have that option. It's just not exactly the same as it was.
Yeah.
And if the more people who actually get on there and buy it, the more they'll do it. So that's definitely if you want to go out and buy some of it right now type thing.
Cool. So we're going to jump into the actual large format. camera itself. So there there's certainly more to it than your traditional SLRs. There's actually, I pretty much call it the whole anatomy. I guess, would you guys agree that there's like just a complete Grey's Anatomy to a large format, as Brent pulls up this massive 8x10.
Oh, good grief.
This thing's beautiful.
Well, but you know, in a sense though, it's pretty simple.
It is.
I mean, it looks like it. I mean, when you look at these wooden field cameras and you see the brass and the bellows but the in the movements, but the reality is it's a pretty simple camera.
Yeah.
I mean, really, to start talking about it, looking here, I mean, not we all, in a sense, because nobody does this anymore, but a lot of us learned photography, and the first thing we did was make a pinhole camera.
Oh, I definitely did that in school.
And so, you know, you did it with a oatmeal box or something like that, exactly. Right? So I mean, here they still make these. This is a wooden pinhole camera, right? It's a 6-inch focal length, and you've got a way to actually, you know, put film holders in here, right?
Nice.
And on the other hand, you've got your lens, which is the shutter is this. Open it and close it,
and it looks like a little mailbox envelope flag.
Right.
That's what I mean.
And it's a metal disc in there with a pinhole. Mm-hmm. This particular one, the pinhole size is 0.017. This is a 6-inch focal length, and the f-stop on here is 352.
So find a light meter that stops down to that.
Right.
There's a lot of calculations involved.
Well, the calculations on the instruction sheet with 400 speed film said exposures between 9 and 14 seconds. So, I mean, but this is a basic view, large format camera.
Yeah. So how do you guys have something like this in your inventory?
This is actually out of our inventory.
Oh, cool.
This one, believe it or not, these are pretty inexpensive. This is only about $73.
Wow.
So it's a very affordable way to get into large format.
Yeah. And pinhole is really cool. I've never, so there is the Elfster Christmas Secret Santa group.
Oh, the emulsive.org.
Yeah. I'll have to send a link on that, because I did that last year. It was really cool. Somebody sent me a book on pinhole cameras. And I read through it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually really cool. And so that I might have to throw into my arsenal just to learn.
And to explain to people that are listening that never used it. I mean, there's no focusing mechanism on this. With a very small aperture, the depth of focus is pretty much from the front of the camera to infinity. Right. And so, and the neat thing about this is that it had two-way, you know, you can do a horizontal or vertical by how you put it on the tripod. But yeah, I mean, that's a pretty basic camera.
Yeah. And there's not much. And there's not much that goes into it. You know, there's no bellows. So this is, I'll jump into the anatomy of it, but there's no bellows to it. I mean, there's no cocking the shutter and figuring out your shutter speed or your aperture. Like you said, it's all set. You just open it, count down, and then you just close the shutter, and then you change out the film at that point, right, in undercover. So
yeah, I mean the whole appeal for a lot of people who shoot pinholes, and there's other manufacturers of them too, that just these beautiful wooden things and really fine, like laser drilled holes, and is just that set it and forget it mentality of like taking away like all of the things that get in the way of just making an image, you know? So, So there's something to be said for that, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and then we kind of jump into the field cameras. So Mark, you have one right in front of you. Which one is this one exactly?
This is the Vista wooden field camera. This is a pretty basic model. I think it might be cherry wood. This is my personal camera, so I've been using this for probably since the 80s, the mid 80s, and it folds up nice and flat. I have 3 lenses with it: a 90 millimeter, 150 millimeter, and 210 millimeter. I did a lot of work with this. I mean, I learned on a 4x5. This is what I took with me, because if I was going to be hiking someplace, some of the bigger or metal view cameras just weren't, I wasn't going to carry those. So, you'd have this, and I have a little case back there that held the 3 lenses. And then I had another small case with 4x5 film holders that were preloaded.
Cool. So on the field cameras, we'll kind of talk about the format of it as far as the anatomy. So it's kind of broken up. We'll kind of start at the front. So you have the front standard, and in the front standard, that is where you have a lens board, and so your lens actually mounts into the lens board, and it's actually really neat because you can actually change out lenses, as Mark was saying earlier. You can actually switch to a telephoto. I'd say 210 is more of a mid range, right?
Yeah, I was gonna ask Mark, what's the kind of equivalent of these? And it all depends. We were talking in the last episode about how focal lengths, the bigger the film plane, basically the smaller the focal length really is.
Yep.
So what are your equivalents to like 35 millimeter on here?
And I'm sure somebody's got a chart.
Yeah, of course. There's a chart on the internet somewhere.
I've always equated to 150 was more like a 50 millimeter lens,
Okay.
35 millimeter. The 90 was more like a 24 or 28,
that's what I heard.
and the 210 was more like a 100 to 135.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I mean, the thing to remember with using a view camera is to be able to, you have to take the equivalent in millimeters, convert it to inches. I mean, and that's how much draw you have to have on your bellows to be able to focus it. And then to even get closer, you have to be able to extend your bellows even further the closer you got to something to focus on.
Yep. It's kind of backwards too, that you have to add an extension for something to get up closer.
I mean, I think one thing, if you've never used a view camera or had one of these holders, is that these lenses, these are standardized holders. This is actually a Linhof holder that would also fit the Vista. But to put this on, there was a ring here. And retaining ring, and that was always the key. You had to have the spanner wrench that actually was able to get you in there and be able to turn this and lock it down.
Yep.
And it wasn't something you could have one holder and constantly change out your lenses, but most people bought a lens holder for each lens, so that all you had to do was put it on and put it off.
Right, and different lenses have different sizes. Like for example, I believe the Fuji is a Copal 0, if I remember correctly.
You mean as far as the size of the lens board, or
the hole in the lens board, so that you can screw the actual lens into. So there's different sizes, like there's Copal 0, 1, 2, and 3, and then there's another form of lenses out there that are called Compor lenses, and they have a different set of sizes as well. So the mechanism in each of them are slightly different. So the way that they mount in the lens board is different. So what that would do is, once you have the lens board mounted into the front standard, it would project an image circle onto the rear standard, which holds the ground glass. And so essentially the ground glass is just a rectangle within a large circle. And so you're allowed to do what we're kind of jumping into now calling movements.
Well, I think before we go to that, though, I mean, for people listening to this that don't know, is that you're focusing the image on the ground glass, and the image is upside down and backwards.
Yeah, there's no mirror, no prism.
And to actually see it, you have to have a cloth, dark cloth over your head.
Thank you.
To block out all the other light. So when you're looking at this, just on a standard focus, you need to be able to see that ground glass and do the focus.
Yeah, and also too, just for anybody who hasn't ever picked one of these cameras up, what we're used to on 35 millimeter, even medium format SLRs, traditionally the focusing is done inside the lens. In this, all of the focus is done by the bellows on the camera.
Right.
Yep.
So instead of moving the elements of the lens back and forth towards or further away from your subject, you're physically moving the lens closer or further away with those leather bellows typically.
And I think the other thing to understand, again, for people who've never used a view camera, is that your shutter speed, your shutter and your f-stop are built into the lens.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
So you've got your in this case we're going from bulb as long as you want to hold it open 1 second, all the way up to a 500th of a second.
That's
And-
pretty quick for a large format.
Right, and the f-stop on this one was 5.6 as the maximum aperture, down to f64 as the minimum aperture.
Right.
So you had it's spring loaded. You'd hit it, and then you'd take the picture. You can do that. Typically, they would use a cable release, a mechanical cable release to do that. So I mean, that's the basics of a camera. Now you were asking about movement.
Oh yeah.
No, I was going to say on these lenses also you have a T setting, and by putting it into that T mode, you can actually trip the shutter. Then by hitting the shutter release again, it'll actually close it up, so you can do some long time exposures.
Right.
And there actually had you could actually open up the f-stop, so you could focus and look at everything with a wide open, as much light as you could get in the ground glass, and then you could stop it down and actually look to see where you were focused, were you getting depth of field from the front to the back of your image.
Well, and that's the thing too with these cameras, is that everything is manual. And that was always, I got to use these in school. So we were talking before we started recording, it's been a while since I've shot a large format. Bill actually shot one recently, earlier this year.
Yeah.
That like everything, there's all these different steps. You have to be so mindful of your process and so slowed down. For starters, you're shooting one frame of film at a time. Like you said, those film holders, maybe you'd get 2 shots, but even
One
so,
on each side, right.
exactly.
Yeah.
Everything is like you're taking half an hour maybe to set up your shot sometimes. It's very slow and very deliberate. And all the little things, you have to have the lens open to see anything through the camera at all.
Right.
It's not like in an SLR where, it's got a mirror, you pull it up and it's already got the iris open. It's all knows what to do already for that. And then when you hit the shutter, it automatically closes, flaps the shutter up and down. And this, if you stick your film in and pull out your dark slide on your film holder and you've forgotten to close the iris back down on your lens, you've just wrecked your film.
Yeah.
Or if you want to be able to have your aperture on its widest on your lens to view and compose your shot to see the most light.
Yeah.
But then if you forget to change it back to the aperture you're actually wanting to shoot at, again, you're messing up your film.
And another thing that would happen was that the backs that hold the film holders are spring loaded. Mm-hmm. And so when you put back in there, you can get it to lock. And then there was a little lever that you'd move over to pull the dark slide out of the out of your film holder. Problem is sometimes as you were pulling things, you actually pulled a little bit back on the holder, which would then give you light leaks, which you didn't know about until you developed the film. So we're in this day and age now where we can shoot a ton of pictures, look at them on the back of our DSLR and make adjustments and figure out did we get it or not.
Right.
This was. You needed to, and not only did you need to be able to get it within a couple shots, but because processing sheet film was a much more time-intensive event, you weren't going to be shooting 30, 40, 50 shots of something. I mean, you do a trip out west for a week in the Southwest, and you might come back with 50 or 60 images.
And that's a lot.
Right. And you'd have 2 exposures of each in case something got ruined. Right. So, it was a more deliberate process, which I think, for me at least, helped me in terms of composition and making photographs. It slowed me down.
Exactly.
I started seeing slowly. It forced you to do that rather than pick up a camera, I see something, and I just start hitting the button, and I'm done.
My biggest problem, so I took my 4x5 out to the Midwest and everything. I had a whole bunch of film loaded up and everything. And the problem is that it's such an attention grabber that people just want to talk to me.
Sure.
And then I'm in the middle of doing something and I completely forgotten. Like we were joking around. I was like, "Ooh, squirrel!" I'm sitting there going, "Wait a minute, what step was that at?" And then most likely I left the iris wide open, and then I go, and then Michael helps me out with developing. He goes, "What were you thinking here?" I was like, "Oh, that was when I was distracted."
I saw one of those frames that you still had somewhat of an image on there, but there was a whole lot of blur.
Yeah. So you really have to pay attention to each of the different steps. I'll post a link in the show description and everything as far as I think it's like a 12-step process. But it seems like it's a lot, but I mean it's it's like, step 1, open up the iris so that you're, projecting onto the ground glass. And so what I was going to mention is that f5.6 is pretty darn wide. You might see a very rare couple that are wider than 5.6. And the reason is for not so much shooting wide open, but for letting the light in to focus on the ground glass, because there's some lenses that are like f8, and you have from f5.6 to f8. That's a whole stop of light. That's a lot of light that you're losing, and it's really tough. Like if you're going to be composing like at dusk or something like that, it's really tough to compose that shot. And generally, you're supposed to, set it up and then you leave the camera sitting there, when the time is right to shoot it. There's a lot of waiting around when you're shooting.
It does make you for sure think about that. When you've got the Making of 40 Pictures here by Ansel Adams too. Just thinking about how much he wrote about waiting for the right shot. He would set and compose, and then he'd just be standing in a spot in Yosemite for a couple hours waiting for the storm to clear or whatever it may be.
Right.
Well, and the thing is, while that holds true for 4x5 or view cameras, it really holds true for us using digital cameras.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Except people don't do that because they don't have the patience to sit there, and they need to. I need to move on to some other place. Right?
Yeah. Right. I think there's absolute merit. Again, we were talking the last time about how having 12 or 10 or 16 frames slows you down. This slows you down so much more.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said to say, I'm going to photograph and I only have this many exposures. So I really think more about what it is I'm photographing and what I'm doing to make. And I just, as you were talking about this, I just looked at my lenses. All these are 5.6s. So, I mean, typically you were either, 5.6s were the more expensive lenses.
Sure, yeah.
But, I mean, you wanted a less expensive version, you got the f8.
Right.
But you were, I'm always stopping down to f32 to photograph. But, yeah.
And I did want to, Bill, I'm sorry, I haven't seen the show notes, but I'm very curious just about lenses. Yeah. We can talk about that more a little bit later. Why don't you just let me know what's good?
Yeah. We're actually kind of on that topic right now. So what I was going to also mention is that depth of field is very different on 4x5. It's naturally just much shallower when in comparison to like a 35 millimeter. Because you shoot at f5.6. I hope you love bokeh because that is, it's pretty much all bokeh at f5.6. That's part of the reason why in large format you generally want to step down to the f32, and then if you really want to join the f64 club on that, you kind of have to. I
mean, you can make some crazy ethereal like portraits though, shooting wide open on a view camera for sure.
Yeah, I mean, when I first got it. I kind of had a general idea. I was like, okay, you really need to stop down. So my cat was sleeping, and I was like, okay, I'm going to set up my camera, and he won't, he doesn't get startled all that easily. So I went to go, and he was in focus and everything. I was like, all right. So I dropped the film holder in, and then I went to go expose, and he just shifted his head just ever so slightly. And again, this was like at f16, and I was like, okay. I'm thinking in terms of 35 millimeter at that point, everything should be pretty much in focus at that point. And his face was like totally blown out. I mean, like his body was in focus and everything like that, but like just the slightest movement in his face was like completely blurred out. I was like, wow. I mean, that just completely changed my perspective on like how delicate depth of field is on 4x5. And it's even more when you're up at 8x10 and, the larger formats. So, but Steven, I know you want to kind of dive in and learn a little bit more. What questions you got, man?
Well, so the thing about like this, and we were talking about how lenses, mount on lens boards here. Yeah. But so the thing about a large format is you aren't dealing with like, say you've got a whether it may be like a Vista camera or a Vista, or whoever Deerdorf or whoever made the camera. Mm. We're so used to lens systems on cameras. Like you shoot a Canon camera, you need a Canon lens. Or even in like medium format, the Mamiya mount for the Mamiya 7 mount is different than the Mamiya 645 mount. And there's different size lenses that are designed that are made to fit like an 8x10 or 11x14 camera. But you aren't married to the brand of lens for your camera. Most of the time, too, the manufacturers of the cameras don't even make lenses.
That's right.
Right.
Correct. The only caveat to it are the different types of lens boards that the lenses are mounted into. So,
sure.
Like, which one is this one, Mark, that you have? These lens boards?
The Vista was the same. They use the same mount as the Linhof board.
Okay, so I think those are Copal shutters, aren't they?
Yes, I believe those are. So
Yeah, but the shutter wasn't in the board.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. But you're talking about the opening. Yeah. So, I mean, you can buy these things in all different openings. So, like you said, you could take any lens.
Yep.
And as long as you bought the board that fits your camera on the lens board that had the opening that you needed to, you just use the ring and put it on there, and you could use it on your camera or multiple cameras.
Right.
So, I mean, some people I knew, I mean, there were things like they might have, we're looking at the 8x10 now. They might have a holder here that would hold the Linhof board. So I didn't even have to take it off my board. I could just put it right in here. The caveat to all this is, were you buying a lens that was going to be able to have coverage over the size of the film that you're
right?
So that's the other. I mean, what the more area it covered,
yep,
the more expensive it was.
Gotcha.
Right. So, I mean, this might be fine for a 4x5, but it wouldn't fit this. Right. I mean, the lens projects a circular image, and we're trying to put we're only using a rectangle inside of it. And I think one of the things we haven't talked about yet really is the ability for these cameras, whether it's depth of field, where we have the ability for the front standard where the lens holds to be able to shift it to actually, if we're looking at a line that's going sort of in a 45-degree angle away from us, we could actually take that front standard and move it in that same direction so that we have sharpness from the front of that to the back of it, right?
Yeah,
it wasn't just stopping it down. You could actually, by adjusting the lens, you could actually get more. You can tip it forward, you could tip it backwards if you're looking up, and you could raise it. I mean, you had your camera set up, but you wanted a little bit more, the image to go up a little bit higher. You could raise the front standard a little bit, but it was all dependent on the coverage of the lens you had.
Gotcha.
Because if you went too high, you'd start getting lens fall off.
Right.
Of that. And many of these cameras, if you look at them, if you look at the back of this, you can see that it has little cutouts.
Yep.
And ground glass. So if you had any question, did you go too far? You could just look at the back through that little hole, and if you didn't see any image, you've gone too far.
Okay.
Interesting.
I didn't even know that. That's cool.
So
it's interesting when you start looking at these. It's basically a big tilt shift lens.
Exactly.
What
Yes.
it all boils
I
down
was
to.
going to say that's the idea of a tilt shift lens. If anybody has ever shot with one of those on a modern SLR, that's all based off of these cameras.
Yeah, tilt and shift are just two of the movements that you get when dealing with that rectangle within the circle that's projected on the ground glass. So and then we're now getting into the camera movements. You have your rise, fall, shift, tilt, and swing. So depending on the type of large format camera you have, some of the different movements aren't available. So I think, for example, swing is not available on the field cameras, correct?
no. Well, on the front it is.
Okay, on the front.
And actually on the back too. You can flip these over, and you can.
Oh, okay. So yeah. Okay.
Okay. So I mean, a lot of it
Someone
was
did.
when you were looking to buy a large format camera, what was it that you're going to do with it, right?
Sure.
I mean, some of the like speed graphics.
Yeah, I was going to say
don't
like,
have
the
the
press
back,
cameras
right? Don't have
those.
that,
Right, that's what
So
it
I
was.
mean, when you were making this decision, you had to ask yourself, am I going to be using this to do a lot of buildings, and I want to really straighten out the lines in the architecture, or am I photographing people, or I'm doing landscapes, or it's not quite as so I mean, we have these field cameras, and then Brent over here has the monorail cameras that have even more movement
Yes.
on them, and while you would use these in architecture, but you'd also use them in the studio where you're photographing products that you needed to be able to straighten out the lines and get more depth of field. I mean, now it's easy. Like you said, we've tilt shift lenses. You make a photograph and you put it in Lightroom, and you can almost have the same ability in Lightroom to straighten out your photographs now.
Right.
Back then you didn't have that. So you had to have it on your negative.
I mean, and I've never tried it, but some people also kind of, some enlargers in the darkroom, you could actually basically do the same thing as you're doing in Lightroom to adjust like a horizon or perspective.
To an extent, yeah.
By just tilting this, just changing that projection of light.
And before we get off these cameras, in a sense, the other thing you have to realize is that you could actually put different ground glass on here.
Okay. So different edgings.
So you had, this one you'll see has a grid pattern on it, right? So you could,
that's the kind that I've shot before.
This one doesn't. So, there were all these accessories that you had that you could, depending on what kind of work you were doing, that gave you, we talked before we started recording that, the Playboy centerfolds were done on 11 by 14 cameras. And then the back of that camera, they block off the exact proportions of what the centerfold was, how many inches by whatever inches. And that's all they would shoot on this 11 by 14 piece of film. They would shoot but they could have it blocked off on the back.
Cool.
And I know some cameras have reducing backs.
Right.
Where you can, so like if you have an 8x10 camera, but you want to shoot 4x5 film.
You could do that.
You can put that in 4x5 area ground glass so you see what you're shooting, and you can put that smaller film holder in.
But you can also, on many of them, you're able to put roll film backs on them.
Yeah, that's
120 roll, 6x9, whatever. As almost whatever you wanted to shoot on them, you could. And there were even view cameras that were 2 1/4 by 3 1/4 sheet film.
Yeah, like Horseman, I think still up until they might still have them new, but up until recently you could still get those that were shooting on roll film. But
no, I'm saying that they also made sheet film at 2 1/4, 3 1/4.
Oh yeah, they did.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
and that's something
Horseman did it, Linhoff did it, Speed Graphic.
That is something that you can still get on those limited, like the special order film run.
Okay.
Ilford will still cut that for you.
Wow. That do they do that only in bulk? Like you can't just say, "Hey, I'm going to get like 5 sheets of that," or anything.
I think
like that?
it's not as bulk as you'd think. That's why they only do it once a year. Like you can order like a pack of like 20 sheets or something like that. Or I can't. I've looked at the order form just to look at it and dream, but I can't recall what the pricing is. But it's not outrageous. It's not like you have to order an entire case of that film. You can be like, "Hey, Ilford, I want 20 sheets in 17 by 3. Can you make that for me?" And they're like, "Sure, here you go." One time a year.
If you are adventurous, you could also cut it in the dark.
I'm not that adventurous, Mark. Talk about like dust and scratches and everything too. I mean, geez.
I would just need to order a lot more than 20 because I know the first 19 would be messed up.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
Trying something stupid.
Again, thinking about this as a photographer, and we're talking about loading these film holders, is that every film had a notch system on it.
Yep.
So you're in the dark and you have to be able to figure out which side you have to put into the film holder so that the emulsion side was facing outward.
Top right, bottom left?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so you're right. But Tri-X said, I think, 3 triangles, right?
Yep.
But every type of film by every manufacturer had a separate code so you were in the dark and you could feel that as you were loading it.
Which all those notches, people have started making like databases of them on the internet. So if you somebody gives you a box of film, large format, and they don't know what's inside of it, you can take it in the dark, fill those notches, and then go look it up. So
it's Braille for photographers.
It really is. And that's what I was just mentioning. If you're ever loading the film, you know that your emulsion of the film is facing the right direction, like towards your lens, if the notches are in the top right of the film or the bottom left of the film.
Right. And I think if I remember, I guess there's no really wrong way as far as loading, whether it's top right or bottom left. But for me, it's easier for me to remember top right because just you kind of develop a system for yourself.
Sure, yeah.
And so I think the first time I didn't really realize that, and I put the emulsion in backwards, which kind of ended up giving this like really cool underexposed,
I mean, if you're shooting on color negative, you'll get a red scale effect. So
I think the other thing is, I think everybody I know always put it in the top right.
Yeah.
Because number one, it was easier to load. You wouldn't catch the notches as you're trying to put them underneath the little holders in the dark.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, if you ever like forgot what you had in your film holder, you could just go to the darkroom. But I mean, these film holders also had white areas on it, so you can mark on there Tri-X, right?
Yep.
And then for me, I was using black and white. Depending on the exposure I'd give it and the brightness of the scene, I'd give it either normal development, minus development, plus development, and I could put that on there so that when I would get back to my hotel room, I'd have a box that would be marked, a film box that was marked normal, one was then +1, one and -1, and so then I could be able to take those and put them into the correct boxes to take them back home and process them correctly.
For sure, that's something that I meant to talk about, and thank you for bringing it back up. That is one big advantage with large format, and Bill was letting me know that we're running out of time tonight. So, but that is a big advantage with large format is because you're shooting each frame individually. You can process each frame individually.
Yes.
You don't have to do even like a roll of medium format. If you're pushing pushing one frame, you're pushing the whole roll. If you are wanting for the processing or however it is with 4x5, you could, like you said, you can do a variety of exposures or a variety of processing techniques. And that's something even like Ansel talks a lot about in the negative and everything too, of like he would have use different developer film combinations for how he wanted the scene to come out. And it's fantastic. It takes that.
And there was also a certain dark green filter, very dark green, that you could actually develop by inspection. So he talks about that, where you could, as you're processing it, you could look at it under this very, very dark green light.
Really? So and almost like you're like a print in the same kind of aspect.
You can continue to, continue the process if you didn't have enough detail in your shadow.
Wow.
Because you're right. I mean, typically the shadow develops first, and the cutting back of the development or extending it really, really affects the highlights.
Sure. Yeah. That's something that like I was always terrified of scratching my sheet film. And so in school, they would tell us like, oh, here's the way to process it by hand in trays. I just ended up getting a daylight processing tank, which is so much more convenient. Especially now there's a company called Mod 4x5 or Mod 4.5 that goes inside like Patterson plastic developing tanks for anybody who does home darkroom stuff.
Oh, cool.
That basically just has little notches. It doesn't use the same amount of chemistry as doing like 2 rolls of 120. And so it's super easy to use and process and a whole lot less daunting. You don't have to have a totally dark room to be able to process 4x5 film at home. But then you do lose that ability of handling each sheet individually and getting to get really, really customized with it.
Yeah. So we're kind of closing it down. We're going to... So what we're going to do is, Brent, you have another special discount for everybody, I think, right?
We sure do. Yeah, this is going to be for anything that's going to be large format. So it's going to include the bodies, the lenses. It's also going to include any accessories. So that means if you need a film back bellows, anything like that, we're going to give you 15% off until the end of this month, which is September.
Okay, cool.
And
awesome.
I'll give you the codes to use in the show notes, but the promo code that you need for this, and it starts immediately, is C41-0917. So please use it. Check out KEH.com.
There you go.
There's lots of great deals on there on this equipment, and there's a huge variety of it out there.
Yeah.
So we talked about a number of different cameras, and even the Pinhole Camera is actually out of our inventory. Cool. So this will go back in. Hopefully it'll be available as soon as the podcast goes live.
Nice.
And
cool.
First come, first serve.
I feel like we could have just barely scratched the surface too for anybody listening. There's so many varieties of these cameras. We didn't talk about press cameras like Graflex, and speed graphic cameras too. So there's a wealth of options. And I know you probably want to land this plane, Bill, but
let me just throw in too, though, that we're always looking to buy these too. So if people have them out there and people aren't using them,
very good point.
This is a big part of our our inventory, and we're more than happy to buy them. So if people are,
for sure. Yeah. These
contact
guys,
us.
these guys know their stuff. You can call them, you can go online or follow them on social media because they are doing buying events probably near you. Brent will be out there somewhere in, middle of some obscure town in Wyoming hanging out looking for cameras.
I'm actually going to Montana this December, so it should be interesting.
So he'll be there. If you got a camera sitting around you don't want to try to worry about shipping it or whatever it may be, come hang out with Brent. He's good people.
Definitely. If you go to our Facebook page, we actually have a list of shows that are coming up, so you can kind of see where they're going to be.
Nice.
It's kind of a nice way. If you have questions, you can always call us. We'll be happy to tell you where we're going to be. It's a different experience than sending in the equipment. You do get the money, or we'll write you a check right there on the spot. And we have been all over the place. Right now, we're doing a lot of stuff in Canada. We're typically in California, Texas, and Georgia, which is our main bases that we work out of. But we even have plans to go into Mexico this fall. So it's kind of exciting.
Cool. And to add, we're also, with me coming on board, we're starting to do workshops through
cool.
KEH. So you can find those on our website.
Awesome.
So if you guys, especially you, Mark, being experienced with large format, if somebody who's heard what we're talking about tonight and is interested, but then just goes online and it's just deer in headlights, like they don't even know where to start, where would you say is a good place for somebody to start if they want to get into large format?
So I'll jump into that one. So the Ansel Adams books, honestly, is a great starting point. You can get them super, super cheap. The camera, the negative, and the print in no particular order. The writing in it is not anything that you see these days. I mean, just Ansel Adams really did pour his heart into those books, and you can really tell just on the way they wrote it. Another book that I got that I first started that was recommended to me, and I'm actually going to pass the knowledge on, is called Using the View Camera, A Creative Guide to Large Format Photography by Steve Simmons. This is a very, very technical book. He goes into, I'm just looking on the back right here right now, just the body of the view camera that we just quickly just touched on, the different types of accessories, the lenses and shutters, understanding the movements, film characteristics, film processing. He dives into the zone system, and just how to creatively use the large format camera, because it really does open up creativity on it. I mean, it looks very, very complex, but once you've actually played around with it, it's actually a very simple system. So I haven't even scathed the top layer of my large format and what it's capable of doing. And I've learned so much out of it, and it's actually, I feel like, has made me a better photographer in general. Just as you were saying earlier, Mark, that it just slows you down. You're much more deliberate on the shot that you're taking, and that the exposure that you're going to take is right, and that hopefully when you develop the film, it's exactly how you intended it to be. I
would like to add one thing to this, is that these are great cameras, but with this type of camera, you need a very nice tripod. You do.
Yes, that is very
that's critical in these cameras, because you need something that's going to be heavy duty that can support the weight, because you're typically dealing with a camera system that's going to weigh 5 pounds at least.
And the larger the format the camera you go, the more exaggerated any kind of shake or movement has. So something that's super stable. And
the longer the lens, the more the bellow has to be extended. And with any wind, it's like you've got a sail.
Yep.
So you're dealing with that too.
There's a lot of decisions that go into purchasing the right large format camera, because I was hiking with mine. It was a monorail, and I learned very quickly after that. I was like, I can't do this with a monorail. I mean, it wore me out so badly. I mean, I'm halfway up the mountain, and I got my Pelican backpack, and I was like, I can't do this. I bought the wrong camera. I love the camera to death, but I should have gotten something like this Vista, and I'm seriously looking at a field camera as an option, because they fold up, they're compact, they're significantly lighter than the monorail, but the monorail also has its benefits as well, like in the studio, and there, has a lot more movements or flexibility in doing those types of movements and all. So
I've got an 8x10 field camera if you're interested in it.
Stop it. You keep bringing things that I want and have no reason to buy and no time to use, but I want them. Yeah. This whole series we're doing is going to be very dangerous for me and Bill.
I know. That Mamiya 7, somebody got it off of me. Yeah, so
there always probably one.
There will be another one, but it's probably better for me because I definitely would have been in trouble with my wife.
Go to the KEH website and put it on your wish list.
That's right. Yes. And so I was going to say too, if there's anybody listening out there who you shoot large format, you want to find out more about large format, engage with us on social media too. We got a Facebook page, we got, YouTube comment section, or maybe not everyone should avoid the YouTube comment section just in life as a rule, but engage with us on Facebook and Instagram, Studio C41. We'd love to hear people's comments and thoughts about large format. Are you totally lost? Have you been shooting it since the 80s or longer? Do you have some hints and tips? 70s, and then also too, if you don't know where to start buying gear, that's what KEH is, some amazing staff and salespeople who are experts at this stuff.
No, they are. And if somebody has a question for me, my email is mmaio@keh.com. And again, just go to the website, check out some of the stuff that's there. If you have any questions, there'll be a number of people at KEH that will be able to answer. And if you have anything specific about using it, I'd be more than happy to talk to people.
And that's fantastic.
Cool. And if you have the weird questions, we kind of thrive on that because we have a staff of knowledge that is just incredible.
I'll see what weird questions I can come up with.
I've got somebody that can answer them. I pretty much guarantee you that.
For me, it's almost like I feel like I know nothing compared to what many of the people at KEH do in terms of their knowledge of cameras and lenses and photography, in terms of what we sell, what we stock, and what we buy. So
that's how you're at the right place when there's people like that there. That's really cool. So, Bill, I think it's about that time.
It is that time. Well, in a couple of weeks, we are going to record the 35 millimeter. So I can't wait to see what you guys can bring in on that. So
you're gonna make me want to like it now, aren't you, Brent?
Oh, don't do it. Do not bring a like it, and that is going to be so
There's
mean.
Got to be at least like one good rangefinder or something in here with that. So
I've got a special one in mind that I'm going to bring that will pretty much blow you guys' mind.
Oh man, don't do it.
I'm terrified and very excited. So.
All right, guys. Well, that is pretty much it. Again, follow us on Facebook. We got Twitter and Instagram. All that stuff is set up. We really are growing very quickly on this, and we definitely couldn't do it with the viewership. You guys that are already listening to us at episode 6, it means the world to us, and we just love talking about it so much, and this is a lot of fun for us. So
we can always use suggestions for future shows. If there's stuff you want us to ramble about, or if there's potential guests or whatever it may be, go ahead and post it up there.
Sweet. All right, guys. Well, that is pretty much it. We're going to call it for now, but not too much longer. We'll have 2 weeks, 35 millimeter, guys. All right. Have a good one.
Okay, bye.
All right. Thanks, guys.